and we like to be on time, especially with this time change. We don't want to get home before it gets really dark. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Marian Ann Montgomery. I'm the curator of clothing and textiles here at the Museum of Texas Tech, where I take care of 36,000 objects, the largest collection of this sort of material at a university in the country. Sitting down front, and as they're sliding in, are students that work in the clothing and textiles division, as well as Riley and our new associate, Kelly Martin, who will be joining our team as a collections manager part-time with us, and we have to share her part-time with history. But tonight you are here for an exhibition of Nancy Johnson's clothes, and none of it would have happened without the man that you're going to hear speak in just a few minutes. I have known Leon Weibers for many years. He has been and is still current president of the Costume Society of America. That's the organization that all the curators at museums, all of those that are also costume designers for theater and theater university programs, collectors, dealers, appraisers, all belong to that organization. He's been a gracious leader, and he did a wonderful program with us when our Miss America exhibit was up, which is, if you didn't see that program, it is online on the museum's website under Clothing and Textiles. And tonight's program is, you'll see that Riley has her little camera going. It will be posted online as well once our marketing department gets it organized. Those of you that get the come and see emails will have a link sent to you for that. Because those of us that couldn't come tonight, those that are in the group that couldn't be here, will want to know how to get to that. And if you want to get to that link, just head to the museum's website. Probably early next week would be my guess. Tonight is sponsored by the CH Foundation and the Helen Jones Foundation, both of which are incredible supporters of our exhibitions, and they have helped us buy mannequins, do all sorts of things that we need, as well as to bring in our speakers. Leon is, his master's is from UCLA. He now has been teaching at Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, which is a fabulous campus, wonderful institution. He's been teaching costume history there and for theater for 14 years, and just a little longer than I've been here at Texas Tech. He brings to us an incredible knowledge of costume and theater. He can look at a design and decide out his head how many yards he's going to need and what kind of trim he has to buy, which just boggles my mind. Give me a pattern, not Leon. He can do it from draping and all that wonderful stuff. So I'm on all of those of you that do costume design. Leon is the one that had a neighbor that said to him, hey, there's this woman named Nancy Johnson that has a warehouse full of things to get rid of. She wants to place it at museums. Do you think you could help her? And he contacted a few museums around the country. When he contacted me, he had no idea that we would bring in 117 now, Jade, is that about right? 117 pieces of Nancy Johnson, which is the largest collection, I think, at any place in the country. And it's also possible that she might be thinking about placing her papers at the Southwest Collection, which would mean we would be the place that people would have to come to study Nancy Johnson, which I think is kind of fun. Some of you might have met Jackie DeLay, who was here for Come and See on that Saturday a few months ago in October. And she's a cute little thing who's in 3rd grade who has fallen in love with Nancy Johnson. I didn't know how big an impression that Come and See would have, but her father came to my office on that Monday morning and said, you've created a monster. Everything she's doing is related. Well, Nancy Johnson would have done this. Well, Nancy Johnson would have done that. And I said, well, Nick, Nancy's coming to town. She'll have an hour or two. Do you think that Jackie would like to come over after school and play and with Nancy? And he said, yeah. So this little 3rd grader had an hour with Nancy, walking the exhibit and talking about things. I stayed away. Nancy also brought dresses that she made, or her sister made, for her Barbie that Jackie now has. And so I introduced Nick to Leon this afternoon, thinking, okay, Nick, you can blame Leon for all of this happening in your life. And Nick told us that she continues to dress, and she even has arranged a runway with flashlights, lighting it, and that they, as a family, have to sit and critique the designs. So it's really kind of amazing what happens when you're in 3rd grade. When I was in 4th grade, I learned to be a tour guide, so no telling what's going to happen to her. I do want to tell you that tonight, Joanna will not be with us. Some of you know that her mother died. If you don't know, the service is tomorrow at 2:30. I'm sorry, I don't remember where, but I do have it on my phone if you need to know that. Lake Ridge. Oh, okay, so it's at Lake Ridge. Everybody knows where that is. Becky will, when we finish with Leon, we'll go out to the tables, And Stella's is catering tonight, so it's Italian food, just letting you know. And Becky will come to your table and tell you to go get in line to get food, so it's not a mad dash for the food. I think, come and see cards are out there. We know that we're doing come and see again in January, and we already have some things given to us that we're going to show you, and we have a great quilt with an elephant on it to show you in March. There's maybe the last two come and see, so don't delay. If you want to come, have always wanted to come, make sure you put those dates on your calendar. Leon is an incredibly generous and gracious gentleman. It's been my privilege to get to know him, and he brings such a wealth of knowledge about costume history. And he can look at something and go, oh yes, well there's that influence, oh yes, that's Shibori fabric in that, and there's this. And so it's been a delight to spend time with him, and I'm looking forward to sharing his knowledge with you as he talks about The Woman with the Past, which was Nancy Johnson's tagline. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Marian Ann. That's a really lovely introduction. Forgive me, I have a little bit of allergies that are acting up at this time of year. Being from Texas, I've been in San Antonio and now in Lubbock, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. So, so forgive me this evening as I sort of sound a little bit like Lauren Bacall. I want to thank Marian Ann Montgomery for welcoming me here and for the museum at Texas Tech. I'm so excited to be here, and I've met a couple of the students tonight and the last day, yesterday and today, and have been able to tour the collection and wander through it. It's such an amazing, valuable treasure that you all have right here in Lubbock, so I encourage you to support it. Marian Ann did not pay me to say that. Pardon me. So tonight I want to talk to you about Nancy Johnson's designs, and if you have not had a chance to go through the exhibit that is out in the museum, I encourage you to do so. It's such a breadth of her work and a very well curated and a beautiful exhibit of late 20th century designs that are influenced by much earlier time periods in many different eras. I was fascinated when I met Nancy and we began to talk about things, and we just sort of clicked as Marian Ann mentioned, as we were trying to sort of help parse out her collection across different institutions to see who might be interested. So I was really excited when Dr. Montgomery was like, yes, we're coming and we're going to take some stuff. So it's here and it's there for you to see. I'm going to speak mostly about some of her work in her later part of her career. The Woman with a Past. When Nancy and I were talking about it, I was like, this is what we're talking about. Because it's such an interesting phrase that has been applied to women over time in sometimes derogatory terms. But I appreciate how Nancy has taken a play on that. Instead of it being a woman with a past, meaning some random person who may have been a prostitute, she's actually calling it the woman. It's very specific. It is about a person who chooses to embrace her past. So here we are today talking about Nancy Johnson and the Woman with a Past. In 1989, the Los Angeles Times did a really wonderful article on Nancy and her collections and her work. And she said, this is the same woman, Nancy was quoted by saying, this is the same woman who had earthenware pottery and hand-blown glass in the 1960s, but now she's buying fine linens and serving dinner with sterling and china and crystal. So this is Nancy also reflecting on her own history and her own past, which I think she very much embodies in her design work. And she's actually, I think if you were here at the previous conversation with Dr. Montgomery, she talked about how she wanted to design things that she would want to wear. She goes on to say that women don't need to dress according to the standard that businessmen have set. They allow themselves the luxury of dressing more femininely. And finally, from that same article of the Los Angeles Times, Johnson seems unaffected by the problems of the world economics. If anything that's bothering her, it's her jet lag. Her whirlwind lifestyle, which I love this, Her whirlwind lifestyle continues. I mean, it sounds sort of like one of those great novels from the 30s where she's jetting off and has a scarf flowing, around her neck. She finds herself traveling 1 week to Hong Kong and then next to London, and then rushing back to Los Angeles after a tour of duty in New York. Both Harrods and Selfridges in London feature her work. I mean, what better introduction can there be than that for Nancy Johnson's work? I first want to talk about her decorative work. We're going to go through sort of the very early aspects of some of her influences in terms of going back in time. We know that she's very much influenced by Victorianism and Edwardianism, as is evident by the designs that are on exhibition. But I'd like to talk first of all about this soutache work. So soutache decoration has a very long history. It originates in France in the 15th century and was used for military uniforms as well as civilian clothing. But it came into wide popularity in the mid-19th century, really the early part of the Victorian era. And one of the things that made this really helpful for women to apply is that the sewing machine became much more affordable by the mid-1900s. So the home machine made it possible, and a new attachment called the underbraider made it easier to apply soutache and other kinds of ribbon trim, and very accessible for women to do. So you'll see here in this image on the Victorian dress, the soutache is applied all over the zouave jacket and around the front of the skirt and the hem. And you can see it then in the red dress that's on exhibit out there, which in this is, all of my images of Nancy's things are black and white, FYI. So the soutache that is applied here adds a sense of romance to this, and we'll return to this image a little bit later. Of course, Nancy is very well known for her use of the Edwardian and Victorian lace. That's one of the key elements and one of the main aspects of her revival of the Victorian elements during the mid-80s and early 90s of the late 20th century. And you will see that throughout the exhibition. And here you can see a lace gown from the University of North Texas from 1897, as well as one example of Nancy using it in contemporary wear. One of the most fascinating and interesting things, I think, about Nancy's use and looking back at historical Victorian objects of dress are the use of detachable lace collars and cuffs. Now, this is fairly unique. I don't recall this being younger in the mid-80s and 90s, but I do know about these, and I've put them on many people on stage in my designs for theater and opera. So these lace collars and cuffs, as you see on one side, come from Godey's Ladies Book, which is the go-to resource for women in the mid to late 19th century. How many out there are familiar with Godey's Ladies Book? Fantastic. So Godey's Ladies Book was a place where women went to look for fashion, advice columns, recipes, music, stories, the list goes on. It was the first magazine truly for women and catered to their things. And you could actually make things from the garments that they featured in the magazine. And so next to it here is actually an extant set of Nancy's designed lace, Battenberg lace cuff and collar that you could take out and then launder, made of rayon. Continuing with that, here at the end of the 19th century, you see two women with those same or similar kinds of lace collars and cuffs. And of the late 20th century, a woman who has them attached to her dress there. This is clearly a set that can be removed from this dress, I suspect. But it also, I think this image really harkens to, and this is alluded to again in the exhibition, I think this image really evokes Princess Diana. So let's take a break here for a second and talk about Battenberg lace. How many of you are familiar with Battenberg lace? Oh, excellent, great. So Battenberg lace is truly an American invention. It was first identified and known of the earliest times in the 1890s in New York. And Nancy's work utilizes Battenberg lace so frequently and in so many different ways. She frequently would purchase and acquire and then recut and reshape oval or circular tablecloths or tablecloths and napkins into different kinds of garments and use that in a way. And a really excellent example is out on display right now with this dress and jacket, which is very reminiscent of these Battenberg lace jackets and bedcoats or housecoats from the early 1900s. In fact, Marian Ann told me that the next exhibit coming up is for Downton Abbey. If any of you recall the scene in Downton Abbey where Dame Maggie Smith is at home and she is having a fit and she's wearing a Battenberg lace jacket around the house. So Battenberg lace is made in a very interesting and unique way, otherwise known as tape lace. The pattern, the really floral or circulinear or leaf or paisley pattern that were very common in Battenberg lace is first laid down and stitched down, and then the embroiderer or the lace maker use lace needlework skills to then create and fill in the voids and fill in the designs in between them. And it's really then becomes up to the person and their own creativity of what that void is going to be. These were first created by Sarah Hadley and named for Prince Louis of Battenberg upon his marriage to Queen Victoria's youngest daughter, Beatrice, in 1885. There's a fantastic voided sweater on exhibit as well, a cutout sweater that you've seen. I also would like to argue that it sort of fits in this Battenberg lace category a little bit. I see this, and the first time I saw this, first of all, the technique in order to create this sweater is so complicated and time-consuming, but interesting in that you have to have the knitwear, and then behind it you have organza, silk organza, to stabilize the sweater, the knit fabric, in order to create the sheer aspects of it. So this, to me, looks like Battenberg lace exploded, like magnified. And interestingly, as I mentioned, I was in San Antonio last week for visiting friends for a wedding, and one of the attendees, who is pictured here, was wearing a Battenberg lace blouse. I was like, oh my God, where did you get that? She's like, I just bought it yesterday. So she graciously shared her photo with me when she got home. If you're interested, NVLT is apparently carrying them. That is the name of the line. So as we see, fashion is cyclical, and Nancy's ideas that she reinvigorates are coming back around again. Now for some historical time period things to look at. So Nancy's influence, or inspirations, excuse me, really come through all out the 20th century. From the 1920s, this is a really good example of how the dropped waist of Nancy's designs are reflected in the 1920s dresses. These dresses of the 1920s would have been cut and sewn together into one piece, where the long line bodice is sewn together to the skirt to make essentially one dress. Nancy is emulating that style, not in woven fabric, but in knitwear, with two garments. A sheath dress that is horizontally striped and knit with a long sweater dress over it, emulating that long V-neck line, and again, the sort of boyish look of the 1920s. But she adds a very soft shoulder pad, because we are in the 1980s. Shoulders have yet to become big. To sort of accentuate and to be au courant in that time. From the 1930s, she utilized chiffon. Chiffon, how many of you sew? How many of you have sewn with chiffon? Yeah, it's the bitchiest fabric. Chiffon does not like to play well, it likes to do its own thing, it's slippery, it moves around. And so chiffon was used in the 20s and 30s for full dresses, very light and breezy and beautiful and very feminine. Here, this very long lined dress where the hem is sort of mid-calf, and you can see in the image next to it with two layers of a flounced skirt, but also the capelet. It evokes this bygone era of Great Gatsby, sort of mid-20s, early 30s. This actually drawing is from L'École de Paris from 1930. So it's this transitional moment. And how Nancy promotes her work also how should I say, supports the ideas of what she's interested in. So in this photograph and this promotional image, you see the two martini glasses at the side, and the gentleman is dressed in a tuxedo. It's very glamorous. Capelet sleeves. Let's discuss capelet sleeves. Love me some capelet sleeves. They're lovely, they're light, they're very feminine. Nancy uses these in a myriad of ways in order to evoke these feminine qualities. From the 1930s, the capelet sleeves were so prominent. They were in dozens of different kinds of styles, from tulip petals to rose shapes and flounced. The list goes on. And so how Nancy utilizes these semicircular shapes to create this very soft look next to it, also evoking the bygone era. Here I argue that Nancy is sort of doing a mix of the 30s and 40s. We get the sort of the bias cut dress of the 30s in the peach that comes over the shoulder in one piece and attaches to the skirt. But the shoulder pads are a little bit bigger, beginning to evoke the 1940s. Again, we're still in the 80s. So Nancy is collaging these elements together. And what's also very interesting here is the very deep neckline and the cut of this upper garment. So the blouse of this dress, I'm going to call it that, or the bodice of this dress, is actually cut in one piece. The sleeve and the torso are all one piece. We'll come to dolman sleeves in a moment. But then, of course, the ubiquitous lace is there. Again, as she mixes time periods together, looking at this suit of Nancy's, you see the length of the hem from the 1930s. You see the gores that are the inset in the skirt to give the woman more movement, and the skirt a little more flutter. And then, of course, the jacket is soft and belted. Whereas by the 1940s, jackets become a bit more structured, but you also have a wider shoulder pad. And so here, again, Nancy is using horizontal pleats in the suit jacket over across the shoulders to accentuate that broadness of the 80s, quote, 40s that she's referencing. And who doesn't want to play croquet out on your country estate? Again, a little mix of the 30s and 40s. You see Nancy's dress here, but the cutout work, which is also featured in the exhibit out there, and in other garments that she designs, you have the length of the skirt of the dress is really reminiscent of the 1930s, because the 40s, with rationing and the war, skirt hems get shorter, and you have to be very mindful of what that use is. So women's dresses, the hemline, we call it the hemline wars. The hemlines go up and come down and come up and come down, and they sort of resolve themselves sometime in the 1980s, but really not, because then anything's off. All style lines are out the door, and you can do whatever the heck you want. So Nancy here is again utilizing these, and again the shoulder pads, and evoking those broader shoulders from the 1940s. We've all, well, okay, maybe not. How many of you have seen this suit? Okay. So, for the students in the row, this is Christian Dior's bar suit. It is a definitive moment in fashion history. It's 1947. It really defines a breaking point in fashion post-World War II. While colleagues and scholars have begun to realize that an American designer, Min Boucher, from Chicago, actually predicted this look, but because of the fabric rationing of the war, it never took traction. And so this skirt of Dior's has yards of fabric. It's pleated, and then you have in it this very fitted jacket with an internal corset, so he reintroduces the corset and nips in the waist, and very snugly fitted sleeves and armhole. You can see the armscye is like this big. And of course, the peplum. So the peplum has a resurgence, and it creates this very elegant silhouette that is now renowned in the history of fashion. And so here we are. Nancy Johnson's design evokes the peplum. She uses peplums frequently in her designs to elongate the torso, but also to sort of balance the proportion of the 1980s. And here, with the very broad shoulders and the very wide collar, really evoking those the 40s in this, and playing around with time period as well as the Victorian era. I sort of, every time I see this image of Nancy's design, I think of the model. This comes as a costume designer. I think of her as like, she's the secretary that knows everything and has probably murdered someone. But again, the skirt is very narrow and sleek, and so it's not the full skirt of the Dior look. This suit, I think, is really interesting. Again, the peplum, the narrower skirt, the not quite as broad shoulders, but the broad shoulders in the research image and the wide necklace, the wide collar, really is evocative of the 1940s, as well as Nancy's playing with it with, again now, the collar, the lace collar and cuffs. And the interesting automobile behind her, again evoking the time gone by. We wonder what she's going to be delivering out of that handbag. I don't know that I want to meet her in a dark alley. Dresses from the 1940s, Nancy really truly evokes, again, using the peplum in different ways, the breadth of the shoulders. That hat is very reminiscent of the 1940s. And here you have another dolman. We'll talk about dolman sleeves in a moment. I want to point them out as we go along. And the late 40s, truly a new look inspiration. The nipped in waist, the full skirt, as we see this woman dashing away to wherever she is. Whether she's going off to meet her lover or running away from someone she doesn't want to talk to. Dolman sleeves. Yeah. I'm sorry, was there a question?
No, I just said, here we are.
Oh, yes, I know. It's a good lead up here. So, dolman sleeves. I think dolman sleeves are sort of my favorite sleeve in the history of sleeves. They're pretty darn amazing. Dolman sleeves are essentially otherwise known as bat wings. They have a very long history in the history of dress, going back to medieval times and even to the Turkish military uniform. These sleeves can either be cut all in one or can be also inset. So you can either cut them all in one bodice, as you see here in Paul Poiret's sorbet evening dress from 1912, or they're inset, as you can see here in this mantle from the from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So you have this very roomy sleeve that opens up and is, I would say, sort of welcoming and enveloping. And Nancy uses these frequently, whether they're short sleeves, 3/4 length sleeves, or full length sleeves. Part of the reason I think Nancy uses these is they conserve and utilize the fabric to its greatest extent, because it's essentially a geometric shape. Contemporary sleeve patterns are they're sort of oddly shaped. They're not just tubes as we think about them. Contemporary sleeve patterns are sort of V-shaped they look like kind of like an ice cream cone. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about here, thank you. And so by utilizing this, you can actually maximize the use of the fabric without much waste. And Nancy Johnson does that again here in in this fantastic dress that is a very full skirt, dolman sleeves, and a very interesting waistline. And I think also what's wonderful about this dress is there's this center front seam that goes all the way down the dress. Again, maximizing the cut. We hardly ever see center front seams that's not a closure. Okay, at this point, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about other kinds of influence that I see in Nancy Johnson's work. Film, romance, and noir. The danger, the power, the seduction, ennui, innocence, and the contradiction of Nancy Johnson's designs. As a Los Angeles-based designer, Nancy is also a world traveler. She is well aware of her surroundings, and what's going on. She's lived in Los Angeles for quite some time, the center of film until very recently of the world. And here are a few things in which I find interesting as I look at how she designs and how she promotes her designs. Nancy has said, "A woman is a creature of infinite attitudes and subtle moods. Her individual style enchants the world, weaving a spell of classic beauty." Let's discuss Shirley MacLaine. Shirley MacLaine, as an accomplished actress, has played every role you can imagine, and she continues to do so. And what I love about this is the comedy and her power on stage and the way she holds herself, and one of the few remaining actors of the golden age of Hollywood. In conjunction with how Nancy is promoting this suit dress, the glamour of train travel. Here I am with my mink, I'm getting off the train, there's something very romantic. If we all think back to the old movies, the black and white movies of the 30s and 40s, everything happened on a train. I mean, Murder on the Orient Express. Everything happened on a train. And she's here with her Louis Vuitton luggage saying, "Don't forget this. It's here, it's right here. Inside it might be a dead body, but you would never know." Liza Minnelli. Looking at Nancy's work and some of this, and this image here on the right, completely evokes, and even the pose, some of Liza Minnelli's classic looks. Liza Minnelli's career in the 70s and the 80s were known for glamour, decadence, Studio 54, yet the innocence and ennui, especially as Sally Bowles in Cabaret. Finally, film noir and the Gothic romance. Here we see, when I first saw this promotional image of Nancy's designs that began this lecture, it reminded me of something and I couldn't quite figure it out. It's like, oh, I've seen that, where have I seen that? And as I started to search and search and search, I was like, I couldn't find it. I was like, oh, this is such a trope. And I happened to be watching a rerun, because I was like needing some time off from meeting new people on television. I was watching a rerun of Star Trek Voyager. And Captain Janeway, Kate Mulgrew, is in a holodeck, and she's decided to participate in a Gothic romance novel, very much akin to like Heathcliff and On the Moors. And as I started to do more searching, I came across, and I was like, oh, I forgot about Human Desire from 1954. So it's nearly the exact same image, and the rain spattered across the window. So you have this idea that Nancy evokes, not only in her promotional material, but in her design, of women who might be interesting or dangerous or mysterious in some way. And Gloria Graham's character, Vicky, really gets put through the ringer in that film. Finally, I close with a promotional kit for the upcoming exhibition. I am a woman, Mary. I can be as contrary as I choose. Lady Violet Crowley, Dame Maggie Smith. Are there any questions? Now I can see you.
Would you explain how that Battenberg lace, you said it was a tape and a...
Yes. So you
I
put...
don't understand.
Yes, absolutely. I was going to show a video, but they're very long. They were like 30 minutes. I was like, no.
Why don't you just go back to the image? And
Oh, sure.
trace your finger over it.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Okay. So, do I get the...
There you go.
Is there? Okay, great. Okay, so these images here, do you see the cursor?
I do.
Okay, so these are the taped images. So you take that and you put it in the curlicue, the curvilinear form that this is, whatever the pattern is that you're wanting to create, and you stitch that down first. Whether it's machine done or you choose to do it by hand, but you stitch that down. And Battenberg lace can be made with tape, like this, like a cotton tape. It can be made with ribbon, it can be made with cord. It's that first thing that goes down. And then all the little linking connecting threads between all the small linking, connecting lace between is then done originally by hand to create whatever the design is you want to see. Does that help clarify that? So yeah, so you'll start with, once you've put this down, whatever that is, and then you can put it over like a roll or something like that, or a sort of a supportive pillow that you can pin into. And then you go in and you do the hand work, or in this case, some of these cases, it would be machine work in in a manufactured situation. Yes?
So are they sewn just where they join?
Yeah, so you start at one side of the tape. So for example, you would start, where is mine? So here, you would start like here at this tape, and then you would come down and you might connect all the way down to here, and then you would connect from here to here and here to here and here and around. So whatever, it's a bit like it's needle embroidery is what it is. So it is a bit like crochet, but you would be wrapping and tying and doing things, and the designs are limitless. There are scallop-shaped designs that you can do. This is a fairly simple, straightforward sort of web design.
So where the tape crosses over, is that the only place they're sewn?
So all through the tape. So the whole tape piece is sewn down.
Yeah, but when they're joined.
Oh yes, so that's the only place where they're joined. So yes, exactly. So that's what makes it that. It's actually quite a stable lace. In comparison to some other kinds of lace, Battenberg is incredibly stable because a big majority of it is tape, essentially. Does that make sense? If you want, I can sort of point at this.
I used to have a collar of Battenberg.
Oh, great. Excellent. So, are there any other questions? Yes?
How do you think Nancy Johnson's prevalence is still in fashion today?
Oh, interesting. I think people are starting, as I said, fashion is cyclical. So we're starting to look back, or you're all starting to look back at the 80s and be like, oh my God, that's super cool. Let's wear leg warmers again. Said no one ever. And so I think because of her looking back in time, people are starting to rediscover what she is and where she's at. And she's a little bit post Laura Ashley. I think Laura Ashley has a larger brand name, I would argue. But Laura Ashley's work is really in chintzes and those sort of prints, whereas I think Nancy really embraced the lace in a way, and then starts to work with a bunch of other things. So I think people are going to, this is sort of a very timely thing of thinking about Nancy's work in a retrospective and thinking about her influence. And I'm aware of another exhibition at another place in the country in a couple of years that's going to be looking at the Victorian revival. And so that this is here is sort of, getting a jump on that conversation. Yes?
So you had soutache and then you have the lace. So is it more like also done in a tape type of fabric, laying it out, making the design, but that's it? You aren't putting any other...
The soutache, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that with cording more than a...
It is. It's absolutely done with cording. Let me go back up so you can see. And if you go see... yes, so the soutache is just cording. And soutache is a really fine cord that's usually covered in a satin. It doesn't have to be. Soutache, you can also use other kinds of cord. In fact, Marianne allowed me to sort of wander freely in the collection this afternoon, unattended, quite scandalous. And I came across this wonderful jacket that has a different kind of cording on it, but laid in a soutache manner. It's a bit thicker, so the width and the dimension of the cord, you can even use a braided cord that lays out in a way, so soutache can be quite thin, so it's a bit fussy to work with when you're laying it out, especially in a very complicated pattern like that. Okay, I think I'm being called off the stage. Oh, okay, yes.
So is it hand stitched?
No, this was machine applied, I would think. But likely what happens is they will baste it down. So are we all familiar with the term basting? Anybody not familiar with the term basting, and it's okay? Okay, great. So it would likely be basted down, so to make sure that it's in place, because then it's also easier to pick up if you need to move it, because you're just taking it a couple of stitches. Once you then have it set, then you would go back in and really put it down. In earlier times, it would have been done by hand, sort of like embroidery over it in a way, in order to keep it. You may also just pick it up. If you're imagining the surface of the textile and the underside of the soutache, you're just going through to capture the bottom of the soutache, not going over it like you're embroidering it on the surface. Both are possible, but really fine work is when you're working from the back and just picking up. It's yes.
Other questions?
Any other questions? Very technical things. And some of that sewing, that hand sewing, I think Marian Ann will agree that when we look back at historic garments that are handmade and the work that predominantly women did, by and large, the women's work is astonishing. It is so breathtakingly beautiful to see how perfect those tiny little stitches are. When you go look at a sampler that is done by a child who's like 5 or 7, and they have these beautiful embroidered pieces, imagine then what a 30-year-old woman would be doing with those skills 25 years later. It's really simply breathtaking.
It is. That's why we're in this business.
That's
why
right.
we don't go anywhere. It's really wonderful to have Leon take a minute and put it all into a very scholarly context. So we've been playing with Nancy Johnson for several months here, getting it ready and dressing, and now that he's brought the soutache up, what he saw was that white jacket that we got as a bribe. And so, yeah, there's a great long story for it. You have to give me drunk to tell it though.
There's wine.
Not enough. But we'll dress that and show it in January. So we will show our new, relatively new to us, 1860s white jacket and vest that are similar to the first image that he showed you with soutache. And you'll see what he's talking about. If you come and see in January, we promise that. And if there's bad weather, if you've emailed me your RSVP, you will know immediately that we aren't having it. If I know it's been canceled because of weather, so don't worry about that. It's only 6:45, so that's great, good timing. Thank you for getting us through. It's been wonderful to have another scholar look at this because I get so deep into the weeds of writing the labels and getting it up, and Nancy wants this and she wants that, and Andy wants this, and so it's nice to have a scholar step back and look at it, and it was great to hear you. Please go out and get at the table, and Becky will come to you and ask you to go to the buffet table. Thank you for coming. Oh, I'm sorry, yes?
Can we walk into where the dresses are as well, or no?
Gabe, the exhibit is open, isn't it? Yeah, we have a security guard out there, so you can do that, yes.
And I have one pitch to make. As Marian Ann mentioned at the beginning, I'm president of the Costume Society of America. Every Wednesday, the last Wednesday of every month, I host an online free session called Dress and Drinks. It's very casual. It started during COVID because we all were at home and we all needed a cocktail. And so I usually have a conversation with a collection around the country. Marian Ann has been one of them. We're up to almost the 60th episode. It's also on our YouTube channel, so if you're interested, let Marian Ann know, or if you go to the Costume Society of America's website, you can also find information about it.
You can Google Dress and Drinks.
Yes, and you can just, I don't know if you can Google Dress and Drinks,
Go
but
to YouTube and put in.
But going to YouTube, you can also go to, we have a YouTube channel. If you go there and you put in Costume Society of America, Dress and Drinks, it'll come right up. And happy to send you information if you want to come and join. It's free, it's an hour long, and it's usually a good time. Thank you all very much.